Welcome into another edition of Hand Raise Guys, presented by Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. I'm Neal McCready. Today on the show, both Chase Parham and I have different interviews with two different guests. Chris Malloy, the Ole Miss men's golf coach, joins Chase, talks about a number of things, including the Rebels qualifying for the national championships in Arizona after a successful tournament in Norman, Oklahoma over the course of this week. And then I talk the latest in SEC theater football with Braden Gall of ESPN Radio, based out of Nashville. Kind enough to give me about 40 minutes of his time. He's great. Talked about all the Nick Saban stuff yesterday with Jimbo Fisher, which is still hard to believe that actually happened. The league has put the kibosh on interviews involving head coaches for a minute. I suspect until everyone gets to Destin and Greg Sankey can have a word. So we'll talk about that. We'll talk about his thoughts on the SEC football schedule, his thoughts on the Rebels, the SEC West, and some other things with him today. Again, before we get into all that, I want to tell you about Comer Heating and Air, Southern Air Conditioning and Heating. It's getting hot outside, starting to get that summer weather. You want to make sure that your air conditioner is ready to roll, that you've got your cooling and everything in place, your Freon and all that. If you live in the Oxford, Tupelo, surrounding area, get in touch with Comer, 662-801-1777. If you live in Memphis, DeSoto County, Hernando, South Haven, that area, get in touch with the people at Southern Air Conditioning and Heating, 662-429-4429. Service is incredible. Eric Payne and all the people at Comer and Southern have been great for me and my family over the last, 10 years or so that we've been using them, maybe longer than that. And they'll take care of you as well. So if you have any questions, if you know you're going to need heating and AC work, new units, that kind of thing, you need to get in touch with those guys today. I'm coming to you from the Clark Ford Studios. Clark Ford's in Amory, Mississippi. 662-257-1900 is the number. Call it. Ask for Corey Clark. Tell Corey what Ford product you're looking for. He will send you a quote within 15 minutes in business hours. It's right to the bottom line. No hassle, no haggle. Get your quote. The rest, completely up to you. You can shop that quote around, or you can do what I've done, what I recommend that you do, and that's hop into a Clark Ford today. 662-257-1900. Braden Gall, Chris Malloy, all guests join on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Rafters Music and Food on the Square in Oxford. Great place to grab a burger, a po' boy, an appetizer. They've got a great beer selection, full bar, and more. If you're in town for Ole Miss baseball this weekend, or just in town in general, want to get out of the heat for a minute, stop at Rafters. Tell Hudson and the people there that you heard about him here on the podcast. We'd appreciate that as well. So Ole Miss softball plays in the NCAA tournament tonight. That game can be seen on ESPN Plus. In other words, it's streaming. Gets started at 6:30 Central Time. Ole Miss plays Loyola Marymount in the UCLA Regional. So good luck to the Rebels as they get started with their NCAA tournament. I'm sure they hope is a run. So that game again, 6:30. You can watch it on ESPN Plus. Another game that will be on ESPN Plus is Ole Miss baseball. The Rebels coming off of a 10-5 loss on Thursday night to Texas A&M. They play tonight at 7 in Oxford. There's a story at rebelgrove.com. Chase has the latest from last night, and then also a story on Hunter Elliott and making a critical start for him, the freshman for Ole Miss. Looking around the SEC last night, Auburn and Kentucky were rained out. They're playing a doubleheader today, I believe, starting at 1 o'clock on SEC Plus. So the Tigers, the Wildcats, are going to play 2 today. Missouri upset Georgia yesterday. Big loss for Georgia as they're trying to work on hosting and that kind of thing. Missouri's just been kind of this scrappy team. They're 9-19 in the SEC, but they clearly haven't quit. They beat Georgia 11-3. Tennessee improved to 23-5 in the league with a 27-2. 27-2. How about that for a scoreline? Box score, I should say. 27 runs on 25 hits for Tennessee. Mississippi State, 2 runs on 5 hits. At one point, that game was like 20-0. Tennessee now 47-7 overall, 23-5 in the SEC. Mississippi State in real danger of not even qualifying for Hoover. They're 9-19 in the SEC, 26-28 overall. Florida got a big win last night over South Carolina in Gainesville, 14-5. The Gators beat the Gamecocks. South Carolina now 12-16 in the league. Florida improves to 14-14 in the league. Pretty much eliminates any doubt about making the NCAA tournament at this point. Florida going to be a difficult number 2 seed for somebody in the NCAA tournament. Arkansas went to Tuscaloosa on Thursday, win game 1 of that series, 7-3 for the Hogs, 7 runs on 8 hits. Alabama had 10 hits, but they committed a critical error, and Arkansas gets the win there. They stay with Texas A&M atop the SEC West at 18-10. Big win for the Hogs as they try to get a regional locked up in Fayetteville. Pretty big loss for Alabama as they're trying to win enough to not only get to Hoover, but I think they've maintained some outside hope of getting to the NCAA tournament, that beginning to wither away. Alabama now 10-17 in the SEC. They'll play game 2 tonight in Tuscaloosa. We mentioned the Ole Miss Texas A&M score. Ole Miss had 2 errors last night, 5 runs on 8 hits. Texas A&M 14 hits, including resulting in 10 runs. Ole Miss had an altercation late in that game. You've read about it at rebelgrove.com. Mike Bianco suspended from tonight's game because of that. A bit of a surprise here. LSU coming off the sweep at the hands of Ole Miss. LSU goes to Vanderbilt, who had just come off of a series win against Arkansas. LSU hammers the Commodores 13-2. LSU 16 hits, hold Vanderbilt just to 2 runs, so a 13-2 win. Big night for Cruz, the very talented center fielder for LSU. So LSU now 15-13 in the SEC. Vanderbilt 14-14. Both of those teams, again, a lot like Florida, going to be very difficult number 2 seeds for somebody in the NCAA tournament. Obviously, the big news yesterday was football. Jimbo Fisher responding quite passionately to Nick Saban's comments on Wednesday night regarding Texas A&M and buying, his words, the entire signing class. Jimbo Fisher was not happy with those comments. He pushed back quite forcefully. You've probably seen it by now. It's been everywhere. If you haven't seen that, find Jimbo Fisher's press conference from yesterday and watch it. I'm still stunned that it happened in some ways. In other ways, not so surprised. Those two have been kind of going at each other for a while. That relationship has never been as cordial as maybe it's been portrayed to be. Jimbo Fisher beat Nick Saban last year on the field, crushed him in recruiting. So it's a lot that happened with those comments. Both got a public reprimand. That'll stop it. Both got a public reprimand from Greg Sankey, who generally said, hey, there's nothing I can do here. Lane Kiffin, Eli Drinkwitz, some others. Saw Hunter Yurachek, the Arkansas AD, on Twitter. A lot of people had fun with it. It's going to make for quite a tense spring meetings in Destin here in about a week and a half. So talked about those things with Braden Gall of ESPN Radio, Athlon Sports earlier this morning. I think you guys will enjoy this interview. So here's Braden Gall on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Braden Gall of ESPN Radio, Athlon Sports, 440 Sports. Got a lot of stuff going on, but you've heard his voice around. Knows the SEC as well as anybody. Does an SEC podcast that I'm going to get him to plug here in just a minute, where I had Sam Pittman on the other day. Probably thought at the time, hey, it's pretty cool. We got the Arkansas coach on, and then a day later, it's like all hell breaks loose in the SEC, and Sam Pittman once again goes into obscurity. Probably doesn't mind at this point.
Yeah, no, that's exactly. He just keeps his head down and keeps working. So yeah, good to be here, man. Good to see you.
First of all, tell people how they can get that SEC podcast, because obviously our listeners can't get enough SEC football, especially as it's become days of our lives.
No question. Fringe Element is the name of the podcast. It's kind of a weird name, but that's sort of what we are down here in the South. Like we've just every fan base has that little extra juice on the edges, the extremes of fan bases. So Fringe Element podcast. Myself, Aaron Tugin, she worked at an SEC school for about 10 years behind the scenes and has a lot of great stories and insight. And I love the league. I'm a grad, and so it's just when I got to go out and kind of do my own thing, I was never not going to cover the SEC. And so we like to think we do it a little differently than everybody else. It's not for everyone. We talk a lot of music and barbecue and, culture along with, SEC football. But we're proud of the show. You can check it out on the YouTube page, 440 Sports. You can also get it everywhere you get your podcast. So Fringe Element podcast covering SEC football. There you go. Thank you. I appreciate that.
Yeah, no, I've enjoyed it. All right. I don't even know where to start with this. You and I were talking just briefly before we got rolling. I want to vilify Nick Saban. I do, because he's the king and we all like to shoot at the king. I mean, I desperately want to be Team Jimbo here. I so badly I want to run to Jimbo's side and plant my flag and go, let's go. But I can't, because I've gone back. When it first happened, I just laughed. I laughed so hard that I had tears rolling down my face at Jimbo's just meltdown. And then I was, as the day went on, actually I was at my son's soccer practice in Tupelo, and it was like an hour and a half. And I'm like, okay, I'm going to find this and I'm going to look at it objectively for a minute. And I found the full video of Saban. It was at an event in Birmingham. It was emceed by, I think, a mutual friend of ours, Jim Dunaway. And I watched Saban's entire statement, not the part that got clipped for incendiary purposes. And hey, to whoever clipped it for incendiary purposes, good job. You did a great job, because you got it. But when you watch the whole thing, he's talking about how this is what college sports is supposed to be, and this is what's happening with NIL, and he was right.
Yeah. So I think the beauty of this is like they agree with each other. Like they both, like they have the same exact stance on this stuff. And like, this is what makes it so awesome. Like, I love it so much. Like even Greg Sankey's like reprimand feels like it's not, it doesn't even feel real. He's just like, guys, keep it down, but don't really, like this is attention for his league. This is drama. This is building ratings for the Alabama A&M game. Like this is all good for the SEC. They have to, I understand why publicly they need to be like, hey guys, let's stop challenging people to investigate each other. Like that's not normal.
Well, they've been down that road before, and that was a disaster.
Dude, it's that's one of the, so I like you also agree that Saban's, again, back to, they just agree. Like Jimbo in his press conference said, through all the insults and the ranting and the raving, he was like, yeah, I think we need uniform laws to govern name, image, and likeness. And that's all Saban is really saying. You cannot use the phrase bought every player on the team. Like you can't use that phrase. You have to know that that phrase is just going to incite violence and, whatever. I think Jimbo is feeling himself right now. And I don't have a problem with that either, because he beat Alabama, became the first assistant to win. He's beaten him in recruiting, which doesn't happen ever, very rarely.
Not just beat him, Brady, he mauled him in recruiting.
Yeah, well.
And, right. and Saban's not used to losing in recruiting. Saban, no. I mean, I was talking to someone who's kind of familiar with what's going on in that state and at that program. And he said, hey, look, and I think Aaron Suttle sort of wrote this a little bit in The Athletic. One of the things that's changed with Alabama is over the last, I don't know, it's been 10 years since they've been truly dominant, maybe more than that, 12 years that they've been just truly dominant. They bring guys in. They get anybody to come take a visit that they want. They bring them in and they go, okay, so here's what we do. You buy into our program and you do everything we tell you to do, the way we tell you to do it. You follow the process. And here's the NFL legacy that we've put together in a dozen years.
Yep.
And kids have always been like, yeah, that's awesome. And then they have great facilities and they have great whatever. Everything's great. They win championships and all that stuff. But now what's happened is those same kids who used to go, hey, coach, I'm ready to commit. I want to make sure I reserve my spot. Those same kids now at the end of the conversation, at the end of the sales pitch, they go, yeah, coach, that sounds great. What about NIL? And he's frustrated with that because they've been behind for the first time in a long time. They're behind on NIL. They're not where Texas A&M is. I see people say, well, they have a collective. They do have a collective, but it just got started. It's nowhere near as organized or as efficient as Texas A&M's collective. And
or
so
Tennessee's, or
University of Texas, or USC's, obviously. So when those same kids go to Texas A&M for the visit, Jimbo says, hey, look, we're doing all this. We're going to put kids in the league. We're just getting started. We need you, but we have these wonderful facilities. There's tons of money. And the kid goes, yeah, it sounds great. What about NIL?
Yeah.
It's a different answer.
It's so I guess it's not even ironic. I guess it's just what we should have expected, that literally all of this, it's all the NCAA's fault. Like the fact that Jimbo Fisher was in a press conference calling Nick Saban God and a narcissist, unprecedented. Like somebody should slap him. Like this is unprecedented. I'm not going to take his phone calls. I'm not afraid of confrontation. It was unprecedented what he said, but like really, he didn't do anything wrong. Like in the recruiting world, he followed all the rules. I mean, that we know of.
Followed state law,
right? Nick Saban's doing everything. I mean, this is where I think like Nick had some fun on the microphone this week, because it's not the only, like the parody comment on the Feinbaum show from earlier where he's like, I'd like to get back to parody, and like in theory, everything he said on both of those comments is actually true, and I probably agree with him that we need some regulation and uniformity over here on name, image, and likeness. And I would kill for parity in college football across the country. I think it would be great for the sport. I think that's what we're all trying to find. But the irony of the guy who benefits the most from both of those things potentially complaining about those things does sort of fall on deaf ears to some degree, because even the things he mentioned in the Feinbaum interview where he said, like academic support and healthcare. And I'm like, yeah, you're at Alabama, where you have more resources than basically every other program in America. And you have more analysts and more waterfalls and more everything than anybody else. And the reason we don't have parity is because of that. And so I agree with his theory on that. But like he could, out of the kindness of his heart, he could stop spending X amount of dollars in recruiting or facilities development or analysts. Like he could stop if he wanted to. And so the same thing with NIL, like just like everything, this is a threat from Nick Saban that if you don't get it under control, I'm going to murder you with it. And that is what he's doing here. He did it with the spread offense. He's done it with the portal. Now he's going to do it with this. And so again, like Saban's right. Jimbo's right. Nobody really did anything wrong here. I just think this is two egomaniacs faking outrage like that. and Nick's actually been pretty calm, like even apologizing on Sirius XM later on Thursday. Yeah, exactly. Like this is just two paranoid schizophrenic egomaniacs that have to like defend themselves at all costs in their honor in front of the public. And like, it's to me, it was very performative from Jimbo. And I love it. I love it.
Yeah, I did too.
I'm here for the petty, Neal. I'm here for the petty.
Well, it was petty for sure. I didn't, and maybe I've known Jimbo for a while. When I first got into I guess my first real beat, or it was my beat, was the Auburn beat in 1998. And Jimbo was the quarterback's coach and ended up basically being the offensive coordinator because Terry Bowden quit. And so I got some time with Jimbo Fisher that fall, and I've kept up with him a little bit. When he was at LSU, I had some contact with him when I was in Mobile, obviously, when they were recruiting Jamarcus Russell and all of that stuff. I didn't, it's interesting you said that about performative, because it did not strike me as performative yesterday. It struck me as I came in with something to say. And then as he started talking, the little, we all have the two little voices on our shoulder, the devil and the angel. And it felt like the angel fell off and the devil just said, hey, you're here. Say it. There was a lot of pent up frustration at Nick Saban that came out. That didn't just happen Wednesday night. Something snapped on Thursday where he said, that's it, I'm done. And he didn't take his call. He says, we're done. there was a few moments in there, and maybe this is just me sort of knowing the guy a little bit, not much, just a little bit, that was genuine. He means this stuff.
I think he tends to, I think what's genuine about Jimbo is like the energy level and like the words per minute. Like if only his offense was as fast as his mouth, like they might be challenging for the West this year. But I agree with you that that's the guy that he is. Like this is a guy that, he's an avid outdoorsman who likes to hunt and he likes to talk fast. Like, and I think when he gets going, he just sort of like goes. Like as someone who talks a lot, and my wife teaches me and tries to teach me to like maybe don't use all those words all the time. Sometimes, especially men, we kind of forget we need to filter up sometimes. And I think Jimbo just gets going, and like you said, this little angel starts to fall off, and this guy gets big and strong over here on this side.
The angel just said, "F it, go for it." Yeah, you're going to regret this, but
he reached for the popcorn and just started.
Late now, yeah.
He was just eating popcorn, watching the devil go to work. So I think there is history. There's obviously history. There's relationship. They know each other extremely well. It's also been building in the public for a couple of years now. It goes back to the golf comment. And then he made Nick Saban eat his words on that by beating him on the field. Beat him in recruit. Like it's just kind of building. And now they're like A&M's the top challenger in the West now for the foreseeable future until Brian Kelly gets things going. Auburn certainly doesn't look like they're going to be recruiting at any point at that level in the next couple of years. You got to do it 4 or 5 years to try to compete with Nick Saban the way Kirby's done at Georgia. And he's sort of there. Fisher's close. He's caught him a little bit. Now, can he routinely beat him? Can he go into Tuscaloosa and win? Probably not. I think, first of all, like we can debate maybe the level of performative nature, but you have to admit no one has ever called a press conference in a matter of hours because of a viral video. Like that's never been done before. No. I've never seen anything like it. I love that it happened. Like I said, I'm here for the petty, but if you take all the, and to your point about, I think you were alluding to Hugh Freeze, I assume, when you said, hey, it doesn't, and I totally agree with this. It normally doesn't work out well for people who sort of like challenge the media and the NCAA and other fans to like look into your program and say, we're perfect. Like no matter who you are, that normally doesn't work out well for you. So I'd be careful if I was Jimbo when I say things like, we've done nothing wrong. We've never done anything wrong. We're totally fine. That a lot of times that comes back to bite you.
Because we all know better. You're in the SEC. I mean, everybody's got skeletons.
Yes, and of course the irony of Nick Saban saying we've never paid for anybody at the program that's been on probation more than anybody else in the history of college football.
I said this on my podcast yesterday, Braden, and this is a Saban thing. This goes way back with Saban. Saban is insistent on plausible deniability.
Oh yeah.
To the point of it being ridiculous. Like you want to go, yeah, I get it, man. You don't specifically know, but you know.
Right. We all know how the system works. There's a guy there's a guy that covers every territory in your region, and when someone needs a new engine for their tractor, a new engine for their tractor shows up. Like this is not new stuff. This has been 100 years of this. And again, I find it funny. Again, I don't think it's any. This is none of this is a big deal to me. I don't think there's any actual big deal here from a substance standpoint, other than name, image, and likeness is sort of a runaway train, and we need to get it under control to some degree. I think that's a fair point. Again, Jimbo Fisher and Nick Saban agree on this. And
I'm going to get back to that in a second. I'm with you on this. I told someone in the league yesterday, I said, this is good for the league.
Yes.
And they were like, how so? And I said, oh, come on.
What are we talking about?
I mean, look at this. Yesterday was game 2 of the Eastern Conference Finals in the NBA.
Nobody cares.
It was the day after game 1 between, kind of a sexy series, Dallas and Golden State. You got the NHL playoffs, the NBA draft lottery just happened. There's NFL teams at training camps.
PGA Championship with Tiger and Phil not there.
Yeah, I mean, the PGA champ in Tulsa, there's a lot of stuff going on. And what are we talking about? We're talking about college football. And specifically, we're talking about SEC college football, where we're saying, hey, you know how you guys did that "it just means more" thing? This is like literally the proof that it means more. It might mean kind of insanity, but it means more. And everybody's talking about it. And the national people are going, those guys down in the South are insane. I mean, this deal is nuts, but boy, they're talking about it. It's headline stuff. And I'm like, that's good for your league.
I would have paid any amount of money to get Steve Sarkisian and Brent Venables on a phone call last night and record it and just be like, do y'all know what you're getting yourself into? Like, because that's what it is right there. And like I said earlier, I think Sankey had to come out and say something like, hey, boys, play nice, like settle down. He had to say something, but don't tell me that's like me telling my 4-year-old on her first year of soccer when I have to pull her aside and be like, will you pass the ball, please? Like I can't, you know what I mean? Like she just goes and scores all the goals. I'm humble bragging here on my 4-year-old, by the way.
It's good.
She goes and she just scores, and then she runs up to me and she's like, Dad, that's goal number 6. And I'm like, dude, would you pass it to your teammate, please? And it's like, so you have to kind of scold her, but then as soon as she walks away, you're kind of like fist pumping with your wife. You're like, gosh, she's freaking good. Yeah. Like you're over here like fist pumping. Like that's what Sankey, I guarantee you, he says this stuff and he's outward being, he has to be a certain way outwardly. And then he looks at Chuck and Herb and they're all like, let's go check the bank account. Let's go.
Well, I mean, who's going to miss that game on October the 8th now? I mean, like Ole Miss plays Vanderbilt in Nashville that day. And I was like, okay, well, so let's see this is now officially prime time. So Ole Miss Vanderbilt's got a real shot at 11. If I'm through writing by 4:30, I mean, I'm not missing it. I mean, it's truly, we do this about hype games. This will be the biggest hyped college football game in regular season game in a long time.
And it's not out of the question that A&M's undefeated going into that game. That's what would make it even better. Like if A&M loses a couple games like they always do, and they're sitting there like I think it's like I think it's like week 6 or 7. I don't have it in front of me, but I think it's October 8th, right?
Yeah, October 8th.
So that's like week 5 or 6. So maybe they're 4-0, maybe they're 5-0. If that's the case, like I'm running promos right now on the Fine Bump. Like I'm running promos on every ESPN platform for the kickoff time, and I'm putting Saban and Fisher on their heads up there, and I'm putting the field goal that ended the game last year, and the rushing the field, and Zach Calzada, and Bryce Young. I'm putting everything into a promo, and I'm hammering that thing right now in May.
Yeah, ESPN Game Day is like October 8th, Tuscaloosa.
Done.
I mean, you're there. I mean, it's one of the, and that's good for the league when everybody watches at a time when, Pete Thamel just came out with this story that I thought had some strong hints that, hey, the Pac-12 is going to break up and teams are going to look around, and, ESPN, Disney has said, hey, we'll make more pie for the right people. And, I've said for a while, I just look over there and go, USC makes sense. That's the rumor. The rumor doesn't go away. It makes sense. It's kind of a perfect storm for the league to have it like this, where you're fast becoming the mini NFL, and the NFL has off-season drama. That's one of the things that we like about the NFL. And some of the stuff that happens in the NFL, you can't do it in college. You can't do trades or free agency or whatever, right. But you can have drama, and here it is.
Well, and Jack Swarbrick said this, of course, like we're headed towards a split from the NCAA for college football. The only way we can manage all this stuff, and actually the parity Nick Saban's talking about, really the only way you can create that is if you have sort of a singular governing body. I know Gene Smith, the athletic director at Ohio State, mentioned that the college football playoff could be in charge. That also hurts my mind. Just like this is like giving the bowl games your golfing buddies like access to the best inventory and real estate in your sport. Like, here, make billions of dollars off us for no other reason other than I play golf with you. Like, I don't understand bowl games being involved in our playoff, but that's just me.
I'm with you.
But this is NFC, AFC. Like, we're going to have the Big Ten as the NFC. That's going to be like 30 teams. And then you're going to have the SEC. It's going to be the AFC, and it's going to have like 30 teams. And it'll be.
You think the numbers are going to be that high?
I think there's two possibilities, right?
Okay. Because I'm with you totally on NFC, AFC. I completely agree.
The possibility is, to me, you've got like these 4 16-team superpower deals or whatever, and maybe 2 of them are this and 2 of them are that. Because to your point about the Pac-12, like the ACC, those are the teams that the Big Ten wants. The Big Ten wants North Carolina, Virginia Tech. They want those schools. The SEC does too. And if you could all of a sudden have Florida State, Clemson, Miami, those are valuable commodities as well. If you can take Oregon, UCLA, USC, Stanford, probably Washington, like there's some really good equitable programs out in the West Coast. And then just sort of, you just got a top half of the country and a bottom half of the country. And let's lean into the whole Mason-Dixon line, north-south thing. Like, let's lean into the identity of it all. Like, you want to add drama to it. Let's make it a North-South football thing. Like, that's great. Like, for me, again, as just an objective observer.
I don't think you're far off. I think there's NFC, AFC, there's North, South. It's kind of is going to be somewhat natural. I have this feeling, and I've told some people this, that there are programs that are just going to get left in the cold. They're like Kansas State comes to mind as an example, where
Oregon State,
Washington State. I just don't think you're going to be what you once were. You're not going to be a Power 5 anymore. You're going to play at a kind of a lower level, and is what it is.
I am hopeful that it's more of like a 60, 65, 70 team breakaway, because again, a lot of those schools still have academic budgets that match, right? They don't have football budgets that match, but they have academic budgets that match, and that might be able to keep them involved. But it absolutely could be the sales could be trimmed a little bit on that, and it could be like 20 teams in the North and 20 teams in the South, and we've got a 40-team league, and we've sort of trimmed out the bottoms. The problem with that is that you've already got these teams that are in the SEC and Big Ten that would be included in that would be quote unquote worse than some of the programs that might get left out. Like you mentioned Kansas State. Kansas State's a pretty good football program.
Of course.
Way better than Rutgers, Northwestern, Vanderbilt, like it's a better program than those schools. And so Iowa State's another one. It's just Jack Trice Stadium is wildly underrated for how good of an atmosphere that is. Like I'd like to see a little bit more inclusive if there is going to be a breakaway. So I think there's a path for like a 40-team breakaway and a path for like a 60 or 70-team breakaway. And I'm hopeful we go with the bigger model. But I mean, at this point, it's total chaos across the country. And college football is going to look very different in about 10 years for sure.
Yeah. This whole waiving the 25 thing that's been a rule forever, 25 initial grants and aid in a year, that's out the window now. And I talked to someone college football who said, hey man, these next 2 years are going to be insane. I mean, I'm like, what do you mean insane? It's already insane. He goes, no, more insane. It's going to be crazy. It's going to be chaos.
If any one of these stories, like playoff expansion, Texas and Oklahoma leaving, portal, name, image, and likeness, like if any one of these things had happened in like June of any year, it would have been the biggest story in college football for that year. And we did it all in like 6 months.
Yeah.
Just the playoff invention took 15 years, like it's all happened way faster than we're used to. And I think it's good for fans. It's great for media, but it's not as good for the decision makers. But guess what? They sort of made this bed. Sankey did not, but the NCAA had chances to do all this stuff, to manage all this stuff and to solve all these problems. And they just did nothing. So there were opportunities to get ahead of all this stuff. And this is what happens when you're a completely inept, opaque, and inconsistent organization. So
this leads into my question that I have, because Nick Saban calls for, federal reach. So does Jimbo Fisher. Everybody wants that. How do you do that? I keep having people say, hey, this is not sustainable. This has to be controlled. How do you do it? I mean,
this goes right back to the breakaway. Like, if you've got for right now, if there's no breakaway from the NCAA, it's going to happen on the conference level. It's going to have to happen on the conference level where Greg Sankey says, all right, if you go to an SEC school, you get $50,000 a year. That's it. Like, done. You get a salary. Here's the salary for every football player in the SEC, because you don't want to turn them into employees. Frankly, if I'm an athlete, I'm not sure I want to be an employee either, where I'm taxed and can be fired in any moment. So I think other than like a Big Ten SEC breakaway where we're doing the NFC, AFC, North, South, sort of like when then they can form their own autonomy and their own rules and their own regulations that can be uniform, like scheduling and all this other stuff. That can all become one thing, and it can be governed by a singular office and maybe even a person. But at right now, in the near future, it's got to be done by the conference commissioners. Like, there's no one else that has power enough. And this goes right back to COVID. Like, each conference had to they had to operate as like their own little entity to manage, and each league did it differently and to varying levels of success. And that's where we're at with this. Like, again, if you know how Nick Saban handles this stuff, he is telling you, I don't really think this is great for the game, but if we're going to do it, I am going to beat all of you at this game. And he's done it every step of his career, and he'll do it with this too. unless the SEC steps in and says, here's what the NIL rules are for us. And that I wouldn't be surprised if that happens, because Sankey is generally pretty forward thinking, progressive, likes to be ahead of things, and doesn't mind, doing big things that sort of upset some folks around the country. And him putting in a rule that says every athlete that plays football in the SEC makes $50,000 a year on top of cost of attendance and all the other stuff we offer our athletes. That would piss off a lot of people in college football, but it would solve all these problems in the SEC. So that in some way, shape, or form, we're headed towards a singular governing body. What that looks like 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 25 years from now, I'm not sure yet.
What do you expect this fall? I mean, everyone talks about this particular Alabama team being maybe one of Saban's best. It's a veteran team, Heisman winning quarterback's back, probably the best defensive player in the country certainly the best defensive player in the country. He's back. It's a loaded roster. They're certainly going to be motivated at this point. Can anybody knock Alabama off in the West this year?
I think going undefeated in general is very, very difficult. So the answer is absolutely somebody can beat them. I mean, Ole Miss fans know all about this. I think part of why we're hearing Nick Saban say all the things he said this week and kind of all offseason is because he loves his team. Yeah. Last year, have you ever heard a more polite and cordial and like delicate Nick Saban than last year with this team, where he knew they weren't as mentally tough, some younger players in key positions, and they still win the SEC championship, of course, but like he coached them very lightly, I would say.
Yeah.
I think it's funny you mentioned Aaron Suttles from The Athletic. I had him on the show a couple of weeks ago, Fringe Element podcast, rate, review, subscribe. And he basically predicted this. He said, I think this team, because it's more veteran, they're more mentally tough, that we're going to see more Nick Saban meltdowns. And I was like, yes, all right, this is going to be fun for everybody.
Yeah.
And sure enough, like these haven't been like meltdowns where he's at the podium, like screaming rat poison at people. But these are clearly moments where Nick Saban feels pretty confident and comfortable in saying what he says, even if he knows we're going to criticize him for it. And I think it's because this is the biggest point that everyone's missed, I think, this week. He loves his 2022 team. He loves it. And I think he should. They're the number one team in the nation. When our Athlon Sports magazine comes out here in a week or two, I'm pretty sure they're going to be number one in our magazine. They're the number one betting favorites. I think Georgia's got an easier path to the SEC championship game. I think their schedule's much easier.
Yeah.
And I think they're going to play again. And I wouldn't be surprised if Georgia beat them in Atlanta. But if they played again in the playoff like they did last year and they rematch, I'm taking Bama and Bryce Young and Will Anderson and Nick Saban. And I think the defense is going to be one of the best. So I don't know, man. It's I'm with you. I think Bama's going to be awfully dangerous. Generally, when they lose in big games, they come back the next year on a war path and march to the Atlantic. So.
Everybody's in love with A&M, and they're certainly talented. I mean, there's tons of talent on that team, but we don't know what their quarterback situation is at all. And I don't really know what I expect from them. They have to go to Tuscaloosa. The two teams in the West that intrigue me from like a betting standpoint, in large part because they get Alabama at their place, is Ole Miss and then to a lesser degree Arkansas. Ole Miss has a load of talent. Now they have a big question mark at quarterback.
Yeah.
Arkansas's got their quarterback back. It just depends on what you think about KJ Jefferson, but they're going to be they should be a very good offensive team. They lose Treylon Burks, but they've replaced him with some guys. They have all their running backs back, all of that stuff. And I think they have a deficiency at defensive line that scares me with them in terms of, handling in Alabama or whatever. But if it's not, I guess your general thoughts about the rest of the West. You talked about Auburn earlier.
I love the West this year. I think I like Arkansas for a lot of reasons you laid out. 4 offensive linemen coming back. I like KJ Jefferson, kept his coaching staff intact. One of the few in the conference that kept his entire coaching staff intact. I just think they've bought into what he's selling, and it's sort of an old school, just straight up ball coach kind of deal. And I think that's a new way, or maybe an older way that we're going back to. We're hiring, I think, fewer and fewer like press conference coaches and more just like ball coaches. And even though Lane like gets all this publicity and hype because he likes to tweet and all this stuff. Like you're the one who's told me, like, he's just not. He's pretty much a ball coach when you get him away from the cameras. Like, he's kind of just a guy, and so I mean that in a good way. Like, I think he's Mississippi State.
He's not in person the guy that you see on Twitter.
Right. Mississippi State has more starters coming back than anybody in all of Power 5 football in the entire country. A guy that would have the single season SEC passing record if not for Joe Burrow and Bryce Young. And Mike Leach has got whatever, like 150 wins. Like, this is a guy who knows what he's doing and loves living in the middle of nowhere, Lubbock and Pullman and now Starkville. And so he's that team's going to be super dangerous. Their schedule's a little bit more difficult. I think Ole Miss is going to get out to a really hot start, and then we're going to find out what they're made of in the back half of that schedule. I think LSU's going to be significantly better right away. I think they've got a plateau that Brian Kelly's going to have to sort of recruit to get above. So I think you could argue LSU, Mississippi State, Ole Miss, Arkansas at 3 through 6 in the West. I think you could put them literally in any order, and I would not argue with you. I think they're all between 18 and 30 nationally. I think they're all pretty good. You want to mix in Tennessee and Kentucky and Florida into that group, and I think you've got the healthiest middle class in modern SEC history. I can't remember. You tell me a year where we went into the season and every single fan base was happy with their coach. And Auburn doesn't count because it's Auburn. So, like, take Auburn off the table. But, like, literally the other 13 teams, every single fan base is coming into this season, like, pretty happy about where they are. And that is very unusual for this conference.
No, you're right. There's outside of Auburn and the chaos that happened, everybody's feels pretty good about where they are, right? I mean, Ole Miss people, they're in love with Lane Kiffin. I mean, they love him. Just, he can do no wrong. I think he'd have to commit a felony on camera, and even then they might say, I mean,
he could shoot somebody on Fifth Avenue is what we're saying.
I mean, yeah, probably. They might say, well, he did feel threatened. I mean, he's kind of untouchable because of the way that he's embraced the transfer portal and the way that he's kind of made Ole Miss as relevant as he has made Ole Miss. And then they won last year. I mean, they went, 10-2 and got to the Sugar Bowl where they lost to Baylor. But I mean, you offer Ole Miss fans another 10-win season, and they're not going to ask questions.
Listen, I don't want to be a wet blanket here. I'm not going to pick them to win 10 games. I doubt you are either.
I'm not either. But I've got them winning 7 or 8.
I think an 8-win season, if they go 8-4 with that schedule, especially the back half, if they go 8-4, and I think that's possible, I think that's about right, 7-8 wins. I think it's actually a huge testament to where the program is to be able to have your best regular season in history, lose an NFL draft pick at quarterback, and come back and still be good enough to win 7 or 8 games. Like, to be in a rebuilding, reloading, whatever you want to call it, type of year, where like Tennessee fans would like commit crimes to get to 8-4. And that would be considered like a huge positive for them. For Ole Miss to look at 7-5 or 8-4 and think that that's a step back, I actually think that's a sign of growth, that there's progress, that the program overall, it's like the stock market, right? Like, you're going to go up and then you come back down, and you go up and then you come back down. But as long as it's trending upward long term, the 401k is good.
Right.
That's probably a delicate, sensitive topic right now for most people, but like, that's where Ole Miss is you're just sort of in that, all right, this is a year that's not supposed to be one of our best years, but if we can still be pretty good in a year that's not supposed to be great, I think that's a huge sign for the program and the overall growth of the program. So I would say the same thing about Arkansas. I'd say the same thing about Mississippi State, Kentucky. And again, this goes to how happy people are with their coaches. Like, Kentucky just did the same thing. 10 wins, lost their coordinator, lost all kinds of players on defense. They're going to come back. And if they go 9-3 after replacing a bunch of stuff, that's a huge sign that Mark Stoops has done a great job, which we all know he has.
It's the first big game for Ole Miss that I've got circled is October 1st when Kentucky comes here. It's really should be that if the football gods came down and said, I will give you one result as a hint, I'd say, give me the Kentucky score. Tell me what happened that day.
Yeah, this is where I think the SEC beats every other conference. Everyone's always complaining about how top heavy. Oh, it's just Bama. It's just Bama. It's just Georgia. I'm like, no, Kentucky and Ole Miss would go into the Big Ten West or either division in the ACC and win 8 or 9 games, just like they do in their. And that kind of game is so underrated. Like, no one's going to circle Ole Miss, Kentucky and be like, man, that's a huge one. like nationally. That's not, but for us in this conference, that's the kind of game that decides how you view a season. Like, to your point.
Yeah, there's a couple of September games that in the SEC that I think are going to be litmus tests that I can't wait to watch. Like South Carolina at Arkansas, LSU at Mississippi State. Those are great games up front. That are any of those 4 teams going to win a national championship? Of course not. Are they going to the playoffs? No. But those are really good games. That the winner of those games, like whoever, like if you're Arkansas, and I think they're going to beat Cincinnati, and then if they beat South Carolina in week 2, well, they're kind of feeling themselves again. And, Mississippi State, if they knock off LSU in Starkville in September, they're going to be like, hey, look, you guys, everybody's kind of counting us out. We're here. And that'll be valid. And if LSU goes into Starkville and wins, you're like, hey, Brian Kelly's a difference maker. See, right away, there's momentum. And if Ole Miss beats Kentucky, they're 5-0 at that point. They're going to beat Vanderbilt. They get Auburn. I think they got a real shot to beat Auburn at home. And all of a sudden you're 7-0 going to LSU. And it's like, hey, look, the back half's tough, but we're undefeated. And who knows how much, you have momentum going. That's and on the flip side, if they were to lose to Kentucky, or Kentucky comes in and beats Ole Miss, Kentucky goes, hey, look, we're here. And we get Georgia at home in November.
I think first of all, I think that the conference itself, because of all this parity and how balanced and how healthy the middle class is, I do think that you probably need to bake in a loss for everybody. Maybe not Georgia and Bama, take them out of it, but I think you probably just, if everyone thinks that they're going to be 9-3, I would just say you're probably 8-4. If everyone thinks they're 6-6, you probably need to just go 5-7. If you think you're 10-2, you're probably going to be 9-3. I just think there's so many good teams that people are going to lose games they're not supposed to. People are going to win games they're not supposed to. It is, honestly, I think, because the quarterback play is exceptional this year in this conference. It's not just Bama that has Bryce Young. I think quarterback play across the board is going to be really, really good, and the teams are really, really good. So I just think we're in for one of the most chaotic and interesting and fun. Again, 3 through 13 in this conference is going to be genuinely fascinating, and I think anybody could beat anybody. And I think that's going to make for a heck of a season. I think it's going to be awesome. And if we're getting this kind of fireworks in May, just wait till till the fall. Which brings me to one point about the Saban stuff we didn't talk about. No, does any of this affect how we sit in our stands and cheer for our team on Saturdays?
No.
Like, we're all going to sit in the same section, sing the same fight songs, wearing the same shirts, parking in the same parking lot, tailgating with the same food and our same friends. Like, it's not going to change any of our experiences on Saturday. So, folks, just sit back and enjoy it. Just enjoy it.
I've kept you way too long, 30 seconds or less. Did the Titans window close on draft night, or are they still okay?
I think Titans are pretty good. They got a really good roster. Are they the favorite to win the AFC again? No. Buffalo's going to win the whole thing probably, but I think they're going to win the division. I think they're going to make the playoffs again. I believe in Mike Vrabel and that coaching staff. I've been in a lot of practices. They are that you talk about identity and culture and physicality, like they are all of those things. And they keep getting younger, better, cheaper, as they say, with players. So I think they're going to be really good. 10-11 win team in the NFL, and I think they could make the playoffs for sure. I think they could do some damage in the playoffs. I don't think they get to the Super Bowl, but I think they can be a very dangerous team this year again. As long as Vrabel and John Robinson are running things, I think they're going to be really good.
Braden, you're great at what you do. I kept you way too long. I think I got carried away with how much I enjoyed the visit. So thanks very much. If I can ever come on with you, you need me, feel free to holler. I'll be right there.
Absolutely. Anytime, man. Always a pleasure.
That's Braden Gall. Thanks, buddy. So while that was running, I've been reading a story in The Athletic. My friend Andy Staples wrote it. It's kind of over the course of the regular season, I did a What He Said, What He Meant feature every Monday with Lane Kiffin, kind of breaking down his weekly press conference. And Andy basically transcribed all of Nick Saban's comments on Wednesday night in Birmingham. And there's so much more there than what he said about Texas A&M, than what he said about Jackson State. Some that he got wrong, but a lot of what he got right. And it's kind of interesting where so much of what he said about NIL is the same things that we've been talking about. He's talking to the crowd out there, and he says, but I know the consequence is going to be difficult for the people who are spending tons of money to get players. And you read about them. You know who they are. I mean, we were second in recruiting last year. That's the part about Texas A&M. He said we were second in recruiting last year. Texas A&M was first. A&M bought every player on their team, made a deal for name, image, and likeness. We didn't buy one player, right? But I don't know if we're going to be able to sustain that in the future because more and more people are doing it. So it's tough, and people blame the NCAA. But in defense of the NCAA, we are where we are because of the litigation that the NCAA gets. This is not true at all. This is not why the transfer portal happened. He says, like the transfer portal, every time somebody wanted to transfer, they'd apply for a waiver. If the NCAA didn't give them a waiver so they could get immediately eligible, they filed suit. Not true. So the NCAA would back off and give them a waiver. Not true. So they said we're going to make a rule that everybody can transfer. That's how that happened. And as Andy points out, that is absolutely not how that happened. Not even close. But he says, so if the NCAA doesn't get some protection from litigation, whether we get an antitrust exemption or whether it is from a federal government standpoint, this is not going to change because they cannot enforce their rules. Just like Nate, referring to Nate Oates, the Alabama basketball coach, said, we have a rule right now that says you cannot use name, image, likeness to entice a player to come to your school. Hell, read about it in the paper. I mean, Jackson State paid a guy $1 million last year. That was a really good Division I player to come to school. It was in the paper, and they bragged about it. Nobody did anything about it. I mean, these guys at Miami that are going to pay basketball players there $400,000, it's in the newspaper. That guy tells you how he's doing it, but the NCAA can't enforce the rules because it's not against the law. And that's an issue. That's a problem. And unless we get something that protects them from litigation, I don't know what we're going to do about it. All of that is not exactly true. There's some truth in that, but it's not exactly right. It's why the spring meetings actually are going to be fascinating. They always are more newsworthy than the SEC football media days, in large part because at SEC football media days, the coaches come in, they're there for 3 or 4 hours, and then they're out. They're never all real together. They will cross paths with the ones that go on the same day. But, you know, if you're the coach, like if you're Lane Kiffin, for example, and he's coming in on Monday to SEC media days in Atlanta, he's only going to see the commissioner and the other, I guess in this case, 2 coaches that are with him that day. He'll cross paths with Brian Kelly, the LSU coach, briefly, and he'll cross paths with Eli Drinkwitz, the Missouri coach, briefly. Not long enough to have much of a real conversation, but they'll see each other. They'll have some pleasantries. And then, you know, but the guys that are coming in on Tuesday and Wednesday, they're not going to cross paths with Lane Kiffin or Brian Kelly or Eli Drinkwitz because those guys are going to go back to Oxford and Baton Rouge and Columbia, respectively. But at spring meetings, these guys are going to all be in the same room. When they take, you know, restroom breaks or water breaks, these guys are going to be mingling around. There's not going to be a whole lot of people to distract them in those hours-long meetings. And these topics are going to come up, and they're going to talk about them. And because I'm of the opinion, as Braden just said, that at some point the SEC has no choice but to create its own rules. It's totally different. You simply cannot legislate Texas A&M and Alabama and Auburn and LSU the same way that you legislate Toledo and Louisiana Monroe and North Texas. Just can't be done. And that's where we are. All right. Earlier today, Chase Parham, my colleague at rebelgrove.com and here at MPW, sat down with Ole Miss men's golf coach Chris Malloy. They talked about a number of things coming off of a successful week in Norman, Oklahoma for Ole Miss men's golf. So here's Chase and Chris Malloy on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline.
Ole Miss men's golf coach Chris Malloy now join us on the Rafters Music and Food Hotline. Chris, you got back in from Oklahoma this week. Your team advancing to the national championships back in Arizona. You've obviously seen that course with Corey and those people last year, and I don't know what else. I'll ask you what from there, but getting back to it, we'll start here because I know you've had a couple of years, and we're not going to focus on the bad, but where you've been in pretty good position to get to the Nationals. Some weird stuff has happened. You guys really blew it out in round 3. They were running up the leaderboard. At what point did you finally calm down and went, hey, this thing's good, we're awesome, or did it take the last ball in the cup?
Yeah, I mean, you're never really overly, you don't try to get ahead of yourself too much. As you mentioned, we've had some pretty weird things happen, and I guess it was 2018. We were kind of free and clear, and we had a player make a 10 or 11 on his 17th hole, and then Kentucky made it hold. The guy hold it from the fairway from 150 yards, so ended up missing it. So, and then the next year was the infamous. Sarut hit a bird, on his 16th hole, and
that's right.
Yeah, so we've had some weird things happen, but it also shows you how fine of a line it is. So I don't know. I was kind of looking around in the sky to make sure there weren't a bunch of birds swarming or any weird things happening. But I made the comment to Austin as we were getting through it. I just said I don't remember ever being in this stage, whether we were at Florida State and had a team that almost won a national championship, South Florida, here when we had Braden, to ever being that stress-free for that last 9 holes. It just, normally doesn't happen like that. But, thank goodness it was. It was good. The guys were rolling.
Well, you and I were talking before we started the show, and we've done a lot of these interviews where you've talked about, the mental side of it, and you're trying to almost be psychologist as much as coach over the course of your tenure or over the course of a year. You guys had a pretty rough SEC tournament. What was the key? What did you kind of say to them? What was that period of time like to reset for this thing for the regional?
Well, we really needed a reset. I think rightfully so, right? People forget we were ranked in the top 10 for the large part of this year. And anyone that asked me throughout the year, about our squad, I've said nothing other than I think we're really, really, really good. And I said that even after we blew a lead and, lost the chance to win at the Hootie in late March. We didn't play very well down at Mississippi State's event. And then we really didn't play well at the SEC, the first round of the SEC championship. And it all boiled down to putting. We were putting it just terribly. But even then, I mean, honestly, I was talking to Randy Watkins yesterday, and he was laughing. He goes, "You're right." I said, "About what?" He goes, "Man, even through the the low times, and I know I've told you this as well this spring, that I really like this group, and it's the most talented group that I've been around, and we've had some pretty good teams here, but this team was pretty special. So we really needed that reset, and that's why I told them we got back from the SEC championship that normally I don't like that break. You don't like going from your SEC championship and then taking basically a month off, like 25 days off before you get into the NCAA tournament. We needed it, and it showed. And these guys got back. The first thing we did was we took 6 days and got away from it. Didn't play. Took their clubs away from them. Reset mentally, and then they bounced back and kind of eased back into it, and they were kind of like their old selves.
You were one spot out after the first day, then had 2 really great days back to back, including in that day 3 when you rock it up. I think, you ended up in second place for most of the day before Auburn, I guess, made a late birdie there and clipped you, moving back to third. But what was sort of what were the nights like? I mean, the guys stay confident those first 2 evenings. I mean, what'd you sort of say to them after round 1? What was the vibe of everything as that was being played out over the course of the 3 days?
Yeah, it was a little bit of a weird week. Suber hurt his wrist before we left to go over there, so we were at the doctor just kind of taking care of that. Then we get over there. We got out a couple of days early. We were playing on bent grass greens, whereas we don't have that around here. So we got out, played Oklahoma City Country Club, Gallardi, a couple of places over there just to get on some bent greens. So the vibe was great. And then the day before the practice round, Brett Shell, who was in our lineup, woke up, felt terrible. We were just praying that it wasn't COVID, took him to the urgent care. He had strep, and he's a pretty tough guy, and it took him down. He never even made it out to the golf course, unfortunately for us, until the second round of the tournament. So Jack Nam steps in. Jack had not played a round of golf for us, since March, and so there's a lot of unknown. It changes everything. It changes who we're walking with. our strategy of coaching. But again, thank goodness, Jack stepped in and played great. We were not surprised. He's been playing very good, but the Knights were really good. After the first round, we played well in the first round. Evan Brown made a 7 on his final hole of the day, the ninth hole, just a little mental mistake, and just a little bit of a weird ending to a day because we had some momentum going. The other weird part of our sport is, so we started on the back 9 each day, and that was the harder 9 holes. So we knew once we got through 17 that you could really get it going, which they did. And even the first day, they got it going. We were fine, but shot ourselves in the foot, didn't capitalize on the 8th hole or 17th hole of the day, which is a pretty easy par 5. And then again, didn't play number 9 extremely well. So again, you just try to stay consistent and wipe the slate clean, and they came out fine on day 2.
When you find out where you're headed, I know obviously the field matters because that's who you have to be. The grass matters, the course, all these different things. What did you know about the course in Norman? I mean, had you guys been on it at all? I mean, you mentioned bent, but otherwise, I mean, how do you prepare for that if you're not aware of it?
It's a great question. And it was funny, just, they're supposed to go, the NCAA committee is supposed to go on an S curve, really, on your seedings and to even everything out. So as we were trying to analyze where we may get sent, I had a good idea, an educated guess, I guess is the best way to put it, that we would go there or to Texas A&M. We had played Texas A&M before, so I knew that golf course, felt good about that. I had never been to Norman, so the day before the selection show, I actually left here, got a 6 a.m. flight, and flew over to Norman for the day. Oddly enough, I didn't. I talked to the Oklahoma coach, but didn't realize the golf course was going to be closed. Luckily, the gates were open. Got in there, but I spent the day over there. That Tuesday before the selection show, and probably spent about 6 hours out on the golf course and took pictures, took videos, just sat out there and tried to get a good look at it and get some good information back to our guys. But I immediately knew, once I got out there, yes, the grass was a little bit different, bent grass greens, that does concern you, but the transition from Bermuda to bent really isn't that bad. It's a lot tougher from bent to Bermuda. But again, at least we got a little bit of, information on the course, and we're able to sit down with our guys and, so they knew what every tee shot looked like. We had a picture, we had a video, we had yardages, we had everything of what they were going to face. So I think that probably helped us out a little bit. But the golf course is great for us. We have a great ball striking team. That's what that golf course is. The greens, being out in Oklahoma, they, with all the wind, they can't get them too fast and undulating. And again, that's kind of what we struggle with this year is putting and a lot of longer lag, putting. So again, that probably played to our advantage a little bit, that the greens were a little bit smaller, and it came down to ball striking.
So you didn't take like clubs, you're not like hitting balls around the greens, but you're just like got yard. It's basically like a caddy prepping on steroids. I mean, it's anything you could think of over the course of those 18 holes.
Anything you can think of. Yeah. Again, we were fortunate. Our women's team, Corey, had gone, they were shipped out there probably 4 years ago. So she had a yardage book from when they went. And I took her yardage book and again, just every hole, probably spent 30 minutes on every hole. And again, I think any little advantage you can get, especially a picture from the tee and these guys visualizing what that looked like. So when they got up in the practice round, they go, okay, I've kind of seen this before. And they can compare it. We had our yardage books when we went over it, so they knew what was out in front of them. But again, I mean, as a coach, you're just looking for any small sense of comfort. And again, that's why we got out there a couple of days early. We played 3 different golf courses that were there, that were, great hosts for us, and got on those bent greens.
I know you said you could kind of figure it out and you predict it with the S curve, but the NCAA's done some weird stuff from time to time. You get sent to New Haven, and that was one wasted freaking day. I mean, just a wasted day at that
Hey,
point.
don't think that didn't cross my mind as I was literally on like a 7:00 flight. I got back, I landed back in Memphis. So I had a 6 a.m. flight. I landed in Memphis at midnight. And on that drive back, from Memphis airport to my house, don't think that didn't cross my mind. And you're right. I mean, like last year, there was no reason that we should have been in Stillwater, let alone the seed that we got there. So weird stuff, certainly does happen, but that was okay. I mean, a lot of the other golf courses, New Haven, we would have been a little bit of a fish out of water. Stockton, we would have, but PGA National, a couple of those other ones, we had a little sense of comfort.
So talk about a couple of guys real quick. Jackson obviously wins the individual, gets medalist honors for the regional. Has been just kind of your rock since he got on campus. Frankly, he's been that kind of guy. I know people try to compare him to Braden. Forget that. Let's talk about him and different things. What is it that's made him so good during his tenure with you?
Yeah, they're totally, really polar opposite players. Yeah. Jackson really relies on ball striking. He bombs it off the tee. I mean, again, he's just rock solid. He's been great. And once he gets some comfort, on the greens, which he does, he did this week. He switched up putters, a few weeks back, I believe going into SECs. Started to putt it a little bit better, get a little bit of confidence. He's going to be really, really tough to beat. There are a lot of other names that were there in college golf that I think that probably gave him a little extra motivation as well. But he showed he's as good as anybody in college golf when he's on his game.
You as you mentioned, you've told me you like this team since really the fall last summer when you started putting your roster together. You knew you had some guys coming back. You knew you had Jackson at the top. You pick up Evan Brown out of the transfer portal. What I guess 2 parts. What's he meant to the program, and then 2, you've got another guy coming in from Boise. You've been able to kind of attack the portal a little bit. What is sort of the reputation, or what kind of feeling do you get just from a portal standpoint for Ole Miss men's golf right now when you go out and try to bring guys in?
We're Ole Miss. We're the portal kings, right?
Yeah, right. There you go.
So, no, Evan's been unbelievable for us, and I liked our team last year. I thought we were probably 1 player short at times, in depth. But our good was really, really good. Our bad wasn't good enough. So adding Evan was just another, rock and a really, really solid player, a mature player. Probably the understated guy, we redshirted Kai Meeks last year. So he's, a freshman this year. He could have played for us. He could have been in the lineup last year once we got into the spring, but we knew he was going to be here 5 years. And really, I just struggled a lot with saying, okay, I know I want to put him in the lineup right now, and I wanted him to kind of take his lumps and get that experience last year. But I knew I'd be kicking myself 4 years down the road.
Sure.
When he was sitting there finishing out school, had that extra year of eligibility, and we didn't have him. I thought, so, as a coach, you just try to compare Kai Meeks, first year to Kai Meeks' 5th year. Which one do you want, right? Which one do you want to, take advantage of? And so we had to stay a little bit patient with him, there last year. So adding him into the fold, and he's just now getting, coming into his own. He had some big rounds of golf for us, really at SECs, and then, down at Old Waverly, he's really progressing and showing what kind of player he's going to be. But I'd say those 2 additions with Evan Brown and then, adding Kai into the lineup has helped us a lot.
So you leave on Tuesday, you headed back out to Arizona. As you and I were talking about, just make the tournament and see what happens. It's kind of the way it works for any sport, but especially golf, where one guy can change things in a positive or negative thing for any single team. But, you've got a deep lineup, you've got consistent guys, you've got a veteran team, you've got a star and super, you've got some different things to make a bit of a run. What can you take from your time out there with Corey last year, just that course? Have you been out there much? Is it sort of set up the same way at all for men and women? What is kind of awaiting you guys in Arizona next week?
Yeah, I mean, there are a lot of things that help. I've been on that golf course quite a few times. They used to host a really big junior tournament there. So I've logged a lot of rounds of watching out there. Some of our guys have played it. It's just a different style of golf. That's why we're going to get out there on Tuesday, play a couple of different, desert golf courses to get used to that. You have to get used to, to how far the ball's going to travel. It will be different. It'll be Bermuda, it'll be some overseed, so that the type of grass is fine. That's not going to be that big of a transition for us. It's, again, I think in the big, most of the country, you step up, here, for example, you have tree line golf courses, you have targets that are off the tee. It's a lot easier for, a hole to kind of frame in your mind. Out there, it's a different ball game. It's going to be wide open. Once that golf ball goes offline, the only thing that's going to stop it is a cactus. And usually by the time the cactus stops, it's a little bit it's in the desert, it's too far. So it'll require a lot of discipline. But again, I think a lot of different teams are going to have to figure out that transition. Arizona State's going to have an advantage. It's, again, different style of golf, but these guys will be fine. And again, that's the whole point of getting out there just a little bit earlier. As far as the way the women play it, it's two different styles of golf. Sure. But at the end of the day, it is golf. And
the greens are the greens. The air around the greens are the same. Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Correct. So guys just have a tendency to try to overpower golf courses. Girls are usually a lot smarter than that, and think they're a little more methodical and think their way around. And so again, it's not going to be a golf course you can overpower. Our guys have to kind of settle into that and understand that and have some comfort in that.
Have you played 5 rounds of golf in the last 5 years yourself? You're not. You're. It's like it's what's funny about you. People go, "Hey, yeah, he plays a lot of golf." I was like, dude, he never picks a club up. I don't feel like.
I played I played with some friends about a month ago. Played 18 holes, and my last round of golf, Zach and I play in the 4-ball at the country.
That's right.
I think that was August 20th. That was my last round of golf. So I'd say, listen, COVID was different. Like I was talking to Kermit last night. We were we played a lot. I say a lot.
I forgot about that. Y'all had like the little weekly game going for a little while there. Oh, that's right. Yeah.
It was ugly. It was bad. Yeah. It was good. It was bad on our friendship at times, but no, we had a blast. But we were playing, probably twice a week. Sometimes 3 times a week. But I would say, Chase, in 2022, I will end up logging about 5 rounds of golf. Yeah.
Do you even take your clubs on trips?
No, absolutely not. No. Okay. So we're going to play some pretty, we're going to get out to Scottsdale and on Tuesday, and we're going to play Whisper Rock, which is great. And that's what a lot of my friends last night were saying, so you're going to play? No. So I'm going to watch good players play. So no, once we get in the summer, my little son, Cash, he's 7. He loves golf. So I'm sure that will change. I'm sure with him, I'll start playing a lot more, once he's able to get out there. But as of now, no, I'm more into watching and coaching. And, and here's the thing. Once I get out on the golf course, it's 4 hours, and with my personality, and I'm thinking that I need to be on the phone with the recruits. I need to be doing, there's something else I need to be doing, especially during the season. So it's kind of a lost cause for me.
We had a couple posts on the board about this. You didn't really, when I wanted to talk to you, I didn't really want to do a fundraising thing, but people who do want to join support groups, help out, whatever, what can people do to help men's golf at Ole Miss?
Great question. Yeah. And so, we started the Back Nine Club a few years back, and that's on our foundation website. That's the one with the Swingin' Tony logo on it, and it's been pretty popular. But stuff like that helps our guys, and hopefully in return our supporters can get a golf team bag, or get depending on what level they donate the hat, a little bit of swag in return. So we're hoping that continues to grow. We are trying to grow it as we speak.
So just get to match play. That's the goal. We tell these guys, just get in the top 8 and see what happens, right?
Yeah, absolutely. You got to get out there and be loose. I think you saw that with our girls last year.
Yeah.
That just that stood out to me, and I think it stood out to a lot of our fans. Everyone else gets tight this time of year, and our guys did a tremendous job of it. Listen, last week's the toughest week of the year. It is. I mean, it's when weird stuff happens, when you hit birds, people, whole leg, like just everyone's a little bit tense. And your goal as a coach last week, you got to be loose. If you were just a little bit looser and more free than every other team out there, you're going to have an advantage. And the same thing goes for this week. You get out there and you can sit there and say that, with our guys, hey, you're playing on house money. I don't think that's true. It's not. Yeah. Again, it goes back to what I told you. I mean, this team was ranked in the top 10 for a lot of the year, and we're really good. This isn't.
It minimizes in a way when you say house money, doesn't it? Like almost takes it off where they go, oh no, we don't need that extra push. It makes it okay to finish 12th.
Yeah, and like that they're fortunate to be here or whatever. No, this is expected, right? And when we're packing up our suitcases, we're not packing to go to to stay there for 3 days. And I sent that message to our guys this morning in a text, like, make sure you're packing for 7 days in the desert. And that's the truth, is you have to expect to be there. And these guys do. I told anyone that would listen, even after our SEC championship, we didn't play very well. I expected to be here. I expect to be at Greyhawk next week. I expect to be, getting into match play and going from there. I fully do. And I know our guys do as well. So we'll see what happens. Golf is weird.
Well, leaving Tuesday, have a safe trip. Let's do it again when you get back. I appreciate it, bud.
You're the man. Thanks. Howdy toddy.
That was Chris Malloy, the Ole Miss golf coach, with Chase Parham. So that does it for today's show. Don't forget, we'll have coverage at rebelgrove.com of I've got a couple of kind of recruiting stories that I'm working on. I know Chase has Ole Miss baseball coverage up as well. Ole Miss and Texas A&M tonight at 7. That game moved back 30 minutes because of Oxford High School graduation. Congratulations to all the graduates out there, not only at OHS, but at all the high schools around. For all the guys and girls that are graduating. I was talking to Preston Cushman the other day. He graduates on Sunday. Hoping to get that story to you guys by some point this weekend before he and a bunch of guys show up to start their Ole Miss careers in about 10 days or so, end of the month, first of next month. They'll get rolling, so the off-season program will be going full speed ahead at that point. So, again, thanks to Braden Gall. Thanks to Chris Malloy. Thanks to everybody in the thread. We will make this the Friday Oxford Exxon podcast, try to get that to you here as quickly as possible today. And then we'll be back on Monday with another episode of the Oxford Exxon podcast. Until then, have a great weekend. Talk to you guys soon.